Hi everybody, and welcome to another edition of My Class B RV. Today we're going to do a little bit of work on this wardrobe door. I certainly am not the only one that's experienced this, and it's time for a bit of a fix. I'll show you what's happening here exactly. You can see that these screws have completely come out of the wall. Those little holes there are certainly no longer holding a screw in place. And even if you looked at some of these other ones, I've tried desperately over the last little while to keep a couple screws in place. This one is even just kind of moving, so it's in pretty rough shape. So this whole door is going to come off, and we're going to try a couple of different ideas here, starting with a universal hinge plate to have these repaired. Let's take a look. Okay, in this side, these are on there still fairly good. There's no particular issue with these on the door side. The hinges are in there good. The door off, you can see that it's left with these stripped holes. And there are a couple of different options that you can do. You can buy, and I'll show you here in just a second, a plate that you can put over this, and it universally adapts. You can drill new holes. I'll show you that in just a second. Or you can actually drill out these holes, basically, and add new dowels into them, glue them in and add new dowels, and then just re-drill right where those are. That's also an option. Okay, so let's look at what you're going to need to do this job. Now, first of all, I wanted to show you that you could actually simply buy what's called a hinge repair plate. And the idea here, just as the pictures illustrate, you can either put it on the actual door itself here, or here on the board that you're putting it into. And the idea is that it holds it in place. The problem here that I have is right here. This particular nut can create maybe a little bit of a problem, and it wouldn't be completely flush. So with that, I'm going to try to do it more of a cosmetically appealing way. And what you're going to need is you're going to need some wood dowels. In this case, I'm using a 3/8 wood dowel. Going to need a little bit of a carpenter's glue, some tape, which I'll explain in just a second, and of course a 3/8 drill bit to do this. Okay, so what are we going to use this tape for? Well, when you're actually going to drill into this piece, obviously it's not really that thick. So what you need to do is you need to measure some depth. And all I'm really going to do is I'm going to take this tape, measure it to where the tape should be, and I'll know not to drill in past this particular point. Let me show you. Okay, so really all I did is I put this tape around the very end of the bit, and I basically measured it out for the depth that I'm going to want to have. Let me show you here. Again, sorry, this is hard to do with one hand. But that's basically the idea. Of course, you don't want to drill all the way through this board. That'll be a way different fix. The idea here is that I'm going to drill out these two holes and put the dowels in. Okay, so now I've basically drilled out these holes, and I'm ready for my dowel to be glued into spot. Okay, and really all we're going to do is we're going to take this dowel and we're just going to cover the end of it with some glue. That's all we're going to do. Just make sure she's pretty well covered. And from there, we're going to insert it, of course, into the hole, just like that. All right. And then all we're going to do is we're going to just take this, we're just going to insert it straight into the hole like that. Let's get some paper towel to kind of clean this up a little bit. And that's really about it. We're going to want to just make sure she's in there good. And you're going to repeat that process basically 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6. And I'll show you when I'm done. Okay, so not the neatest work I've ever done, but the dowels are now glued in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this overnight so they set in, and then I'm going to take my flat saw and I'm just going to basically saw these right off. So we're going to leave this overnight to do that, and let me show you what this looks like in the morning. Okay, the next day. The dowels are glued in. Now, I decided yesterday after I turned the camera off that, maybe I should basically just drill out the third spot as well and add one more dowel and have the 3. The reason that is because if you were to, of course, look at the actual hinge itself, there's a place for 3 screws. 1, 2, and 3. So I basically decided after I turned the camera off that, well, I was going to quickly do that and drill out these last holes and add that third dowel. Now, what do we got to do at this particular point? Well, you're going to need a saw, something called a flush cut saw, and here's one by dowels. I'll put it right down there. And the idea here is that this particular one, it's got basically a blade that can flex. And what we're going to do here is we're basically we're going to cut down these dowels so they are flush with this particular side of the wall. Now, there may be some concern that you could scratch up this particular part. Yes, that's possible, but the idea of a flush cut saw is that it doesn't have the teeth like a normal saw that definitely will mark that up. So what I'm going to do, though, to add a little bit extra protection is I'm going to tape this. So let me show you. I'll tape it and then we'll come right back. Okay, so it's all taped up. And the whole idea here, the reason I've done that is because even though you're using this flush cut saw, there is still quite a possibility as I basically go down and start cutting through this that, I could mark up the wall a little bit. Now, again, the whole idea of a flush cut saw is that it doesn't have teeth like a regular saw. You can, a regular saw, I guess, is, what's the word, kind of serrated. So they've got teeth going both ways, and you could easily scratch up a wall. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Of course, I'm going to need both hands to do it, so I'm going to turn the camera off, and I'm basically going to cut these dowels so they're flush here with the wall. Let's get to it. Okay, and here they are with the dowels cut off. It's not a great finish, but once the hinges cover it and are screwed in quite tight, you won't even really notice these things. The finer finish, that is. With that, it's time now to put on the door. I'm going to need both hands for this job, so I'm going to have to put the camera down here, and I'll show you when we're done. Okay, so I've taken one of the hinges off, and the idea here is that now you're just going to line them up, and of course the dowels themselves will of course be covered up. So I'm going to mark this, and then I'm going to drill these into spot. Alright, so once I have the hinges on, now we're just going to basically add the door and make the adjustments however we need to. Let's get to that. Now that I've placed my door back on the hinge, of course, if you're familiar with this complete hinge assembly, you'll know that you can adjust this in many ways. You can adjust it horizontally if you want it to go further this way or back this way, or vertically just by undoing a couple of screws, loosening the screws, and you can actually move it up and down. But that's it. That's back on there pretty good, and all 3 of them are in place and a lot better than they were before. Of course, I got to clean up a little bit here. Well, let's just have a quick look to see if this closes perfectly. And it does. There we go. All done. And that's a couple of ways to repair a door that just won't stay on. The wardrobe in your Roadtrek Simplicity or Zion or Chase. There's a variety of different models that have this exact wardrobe. Thanks very much for tuning in. We'll see you again.